Well, it's just me. That is completely expected because we are doing some very, very hard reading today. So I potentially am going to be moving to my room, which is in moving mode right now, but that's probably going to be in a few hours or so. Well, let's just get started. So far there's nobody here. I completely expect that. This is very hard stuff. So I'm just going to be doing a more lecture style for this meetup. You win some, you lose some. So let's start with, we're going to start with the anarchisms of peace. And from my experience, the whole, female philosophy thing is like, it's all bark and no bite. So I'm completely used to this. But for all and any hardcore fans watching, thank you. You're what keeps me going. And that includes myself, because you should always include yourself in your most hardcore fans. Because if you're not your own hardcore fan, you're going to fall for losing any fan, right? All right. So let us begin. We're going to start by share our screen. Share notes now. Share screen. Okay. Okay. And as you can see, our experiment is still ongoing and the results are still awful. So you might be hearing this beautiful voice in the background. Just ignore it, like I have. Okay, so the first one is, it's actually a talk that was held about disability. So the source it says is Sick Woman Theory. And it's a Tumblr blog, and the author is Johanna Hedva. It was a talk that was given in 2014, and this is a transcript that was uploaded to the blog, which is very nice for people like me who don't learn through audio. I don't learn very well through hearing people, so this is much better for me. Okay, so yeah. Alrighty, so we're gonna keep going. The title is My Body is a Prison of Pain, so I want to leave it like a mystic, but I also love it and want it to matter politically. So nobody likes pain. This is about disability. Disability is not glamorous. Disability is not about your work union mutually identifying about work. It's not about protectionism. It's not about people who work identifying with work. It's people who can't work, don't work well. It's everything beyond just what you make and what you do. Everything beyond utilitarianism. It's about exhaustion. It's about chronic fatigue. It's about cancer. These are things that everybody will probably struggle with, even if it's only at the tail end of your life. The lucky ones only deal with it at the tail end of their life, but some of us deal with it every day. So I have PTSD, and that's post-traumatic stress disorder. This is a lifelong chronic illness that you get from repeated traumas. It is debilitating. You will be triggered and you will be unable to work while triggered. You can get sick. It is a real disability and it really affects your life. So this piece is very interesting because they talk about the fact that a lot of these chronic illnesses actually have to do with the nature of capitalism, the nature of the world we live in. So let's go through everything. So I really like this beginning intro. So I am going to read this introduction. This bench is the bench of support for me. This is my sister. She's going to sit with me while I read my text. Because there are moments in it where I seem to not be able to get through them without crying. And so my code word is, I need a hug from my sister now, and then she will hug me. So I cannot emphasize enough the power of when we are going through pain to be mutually held by someone, and I mean physically held by someone. Because sometimes we cannot carry all our weight. We are not meant to carry all our weight. Our brains are not so complex and made this way because we carry all our own weight. So we're going to keep going. So I say I wanted this more to feel like a forum where we can all share and feel heard and seen. It will feel hard with that many people, but let's try to imagine that you're all in my living room. Okay, so you know, a lot of things doctors will tell you about chronic pain is that you need to talk about it, and you also need to not let it win. So it's this very interesting combination of not letting the pain win and also talking about it. So talking about it to not be defeated by it. If the pain is defeating us and the conversation is just about being in the pain, then it has defeated us. So we're going to keep going. The number one thing to think about is not feeling humiliated by our pain. Pain is a human part of existence, and it doesn't mean you're weak. In fact, it means you're strong too, and that you have pain. And again, we talk about our pain because we are strong, because we can handle being real about it. For instance, I practice some vulnerability. That's what differentiates us from somebody who struggles with it and maybe loses friendships and family over their lack of vulnerability. So, being a female philosopher and having just talked to myself today, I'm in pain. It is heartbreaking, but the loneliness is powerful because I will not let it defeat me. We continue despite that. And to deny that causes us pain, I'm not the first teacher, I'm not the first professor I've seen with truly valuable work to give and no audience. I mean, like completely wonderful content and nobody's there. I'm not the first, but maybe I'm the first who admitted that that's painful. But by admitting it, I am now stronger than anything that I'm now stronger than that. And I can now say, yes, I have admitted my pain, but how am I not going to let it defeat me? And that is, I will continue absurdly. That's the number one thing you'll see in chronic illness is you continue absurdly. you continue even when it's in vain, because in the off chance that one person is listening 6 years later, like I listened to that philosophy lecture recorded with 3 views on YouTube 6 years later, and I love that philosophy lecture. You do it for that. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about communication over time, communication over large swaths of time, and how those large swaths of time are equivalent to how long being in pain feels. So again, this is a cauldron. We're tying in all these pieces, and a lot of pain is when time feels long, right? If it took 6 years for somebody to watch a lecture video, and for them to be a real listener, that time between then and now, 6 years, that feels long. So, one of the things I've been talking about recently is these periods of time that are just really, really painful. And, we were talking about Holodomor, I think that's how you say it, and also Hungerhauser on the subreddit I run. And these are both starvation periods. But it's ironic because these are currently warring groups, right? We have Putin's Russia is saying, we got Nazis in Ukraine, and that's like the reason for this war. And then we have a lot of the EU, and a lot of people will say the big shot of the EU is Germany. We got these EU people saying, well, he is a human rights violator, but there was a lot of hesitancy in the beginning to let these Slavic countries like Ukraine into the EU. And it was purely racism, because when they first started to say that, they would say, we don't want countries like Poland or Ukraine in the EU. And then when kind of asked about it, they were like, oh, they're corrupt. And when asked how they were corrupt, it wasn't because they were victimized by Russia. It wasn't anything like that. It was essentially that they were Slavic, which is the history of Europe has a very ethnic, racist history insofar as even when things are relatively homogenous, as they can be in Europe, people still find a way to pick apart the little details. So as an American, we deal with racism every day. Here I am in a house that is owned by Ethiopian refugees, but I'm the one who's leaving because I look like this, and the other lady looks more like them. So we're used to that kind of racism. We're used to that kind of very overt, like, this is how you look, this is how I look as Americans. That's normal for us. But even when that is gone, humans then start to pick apart what is still there. And a lot of that racism that turns into ethnicism is to do with pain. When we're in pain, we look for a scapegoat for our pain. We look for the differences. Like, we think the differences in others are what cause the pain. And we look for those differences, and then we say, it is those differences that cause the pain. But what is it about difference that causes the pain? And time is the sense of, I'm here now and you're here there, and I can feel how apart we are. And I'm not going to be there until a long time. You're not going to be here until a long time. And that is pain, right? And when somebody is ethnically different than you, when somebody looks like they could be you, but they're just so far away in a sense, and what they like and how they think and how they look, that causes pain because it's harder to understand, and it takes longer for me to understand. And I don't understand it because I am me and I'm like me and you're like you, and there's all this mutual communicability that has to happen that reminds us that there are other places to go in space and time, and that can hurt, right? Now the question is, what about it hurts? So that's the question, is I want my body to matter politically. I want, even though that I am different from the norm, you know, sick woman theory is the idea that not only am I a woman, but I'm a sick woman insofar as I am physically sick. And the fact that the patriarchy loves to say, oh, that's sick, or that's a sick woman, you know, when you don't do anything, when you have too many partners, when you have no partners, when you criticize, you know, the local patriarch, or you don't criticize the local feminist, you know, all of those things make you a sick woman, and that just shows you that pain is seen as derogatory. Pain is seen as something that is a problem. So in that, we see that if pain is a problem and difference is a problem, then we have this sense of somatic time. The difference between your body and mine is somatic time. And whether or not we are here and together in the same space, it can be more time between you and somebody different than you and somebody the same. Insofar as there is more pain in the same amount of time between me talking to somebody different than me talking to someone the same. And here I may be very different from the average philosopher, right? So there's a good deal of pain in that. You have to realize all the things that the institution has done to women, has done to disabled women. And then you also have these intersections of too able a woman, young, able to have children, but then disabled, PTSD, depression, all these things. And yet there's the same person, there's these intersections. So, you know, we tie it back to Holodomor and Hungerhauser. And the interesting part of it is that Holodomor was because you were too able, right? Ukraine was the breadbasket of Europe, and that's where all the grain was grown in Ukraine. So it was too able, and they had to starve it into submission because it was too strong and too able and too fertile and too, mainly just too able was the big issue. And then there's Hungerhauser, where they were too disabled. They were not mentally capacitated. They were seen as mentally incompetent. They were seen as too disabled, too insane, too whatever. And then there's these intersections that we see over and over again, where people that are merely dissidents are seen as disabled. And in one reading, the dissident is seen as too strong. And so you have to starve him or her to make her submit or him submit. And in the other side, the dissident is, you can't admit their strength, so you say they're disabled. They're unable to help us because they will not be solid with us. They will not work with us. Therefore, they are mentally incompetent, that they don't see that we're right. So it's like the other direction, taking it as they're too weak. They're not strong enough to believe as us. One thing that they would say is the Christian is incompetent. Hitler used to believe that this was a slave mentality. Ironically, he would also say that he was completing the work of Jesus, so that's very interesting. But yeah, he would say Christianity is a slave mentality, so all Christians were immensely incompetent. And the interesting part of that is because you were too weak, because you were too incompetent. And if you were a strong dissident against some of the more social Darwinist beliefs, you would be seen as mentally incompetent, and you would be starved on the basis of mental incompetence. So even though there were genuine cases of mental incompetence and insanity, and even though there were genuine cases of, you know, the Kulak being too strong, there were those real cases of mere dissent. In one case is read as too strong and the other as too weak. And at the end of the day, it's the same person being read two different ways, but it's the same fate that they starve them. And that starvation is those 6 years. That starvation is the 6 years between when I make the lecture video and when it finally reaches the person that actually cherishes it and means something to. That is the starvation period, right? And, people forget that in the Christian mythos, Christ did not die from the gravity of the cross. There was nothing about the cross's design that killed him. It was starvation and dehydration. And the hard part of that is there is evidence that people were able to help, right? So they talk about these cruel and sadistic Roman soldiers who offer to him the sponge full of vinegar. And these torture victims would suck the sponge of vinegar thinking it was water, and it would dehydrate them more. Just completely sadistic, right? So that really, really happened. And you have to admit that does beg the question, well, if they're able to give them the vinegar, then people were able to give them water. And then if they're able to give them water, they're able to give them food. And if they're able to give them water and food, they're able to, I don't know why I just said that. Session expired, please sign in. Give me a second, I will be right back. I don't think that this is right, but we'll take a look. Okay, I don't know if this works. Hopefully it does. So hopefully this is just still uploaded to everything. I guess it just wants me to speaking on the content, we'll just keep going. So yeah, so I was just saying essentially that so it begs the question of whether or not I actually think I'm going to reshare it because I do want to tie this back in and I'm going to forget if I don't do that. So let's just share where it was. Okay. Hopefully it doesn't sign me out again, but we're continuing. So it begs the question that people could feed and give water, and ultimately that they could get this torture victory. So this isn't meant to be a preaching session, but it is talking about that the real torture of the Phoenician crucifixion is watching people do nothing. And that's really what starvation is about, is watching people do nothing. And it's very interesting because I ironically recently got in touch with somebody who had the power to do something, who wrote a thesis on Kosovo, which is part of old Yugoslavia. Interesting intersection between Ukraine, right, and Yugoslavia. So, like Yugoslavia did indeed fall apart when the Soviet Union fell apart, just like everybody else. And so there was the issue where there was, again, religious conflicts. There weren't as many religious, strictly conflicts in Ukraine because they are actually interesting fact, they are Orthodox Christians. So, we associate with some of the Cossacks, which are actually anarchic in nature. They are self-organized. They are hired mercenaries. They're known for being some of the top mercenaries. Interesting that they are also known for being a very fertile area insofar as agriculture goes, because the saying is that agricultural societies don't breed strong hunter-gatherers. Well, Ukraine's a pretty good counterexample of that. Like the kulak is a very interesting counterexample of that. So anyway, back to what we were saying is we have Kosovo, and essentially, I read this guy's full thesis and dissertation. I think it was master's thesis, and it was about Kosovo and how it related. Well, it was about Serbia really, and how it related to old Yugoslavia, and specifically China and Russia, and what it meant to China and Russia. Specifically, what it meant for China to initiate the Belt and Road Initiative inside Serbia, as like showing Europe that it could obey European UN law and could therefore and integrate successfully with Europe, because Europe's main problem with China is that it doesn't actually really mesh well with the UN's principles of human rights, right? Um, you know, one of the main challenges you might see in China is subversion to the hierarchy, and even if that means human rights crime. One of the main issues is also Africa, because in Africa, China is pretty notorious for just like open funding, which is great. Open funding is good, but they open fund and it actually causes more corruption, which causes more problems. And the corruption then is tied to an increase in human rights abuses. So they say, why are you funding people that are doing human rights abuses? Well, it's because where are you funding them? Like, it's one of those things where you have to ask people who are like, why didn't this person give? Why didn't that person give? What did they give? What did the person judging these people give? And China is a good example of someone who just steps up to the plate, and then people follow them, and then they're criticizing them and saying, oh, you're doing X, Y, Z wrong. But it's like, where were you then? If we're doing it wrong, where were you? And it's one thing that you'll see is they'll give to different countries in Africa that are just like completely in need, give loans, so do the Belt and Road Initiative, and then the IMF and other like World Bank kind of things. They'll come in and they'll say that is a corrupt investment, because look at all of these corrupt gangs and all that are enriching off of your infrastructure and like hijacking your infrastructure and making people pay a hiked price for it, and it's just making everything more corrupt. But it's like, okay, so that might be true, but now they have this infrastructure at least, and where were you? If that isn't the right way to do it, you were not there at all, and only now when someone else is doing it are you going to criticize. So it's an interesting problem. These more consequentialist, allegedly problematic ethics sometimes are the first to get somewhere, and then it's like the integrity ethicists kind of parasite on them. And I'm an integrity ethicist. Like, I can admit this about this paradigm. But anyway, so the point being there is that they're always criticizing other people about where was your donation. So the question is, where were you? Don't ask what this billionaire didn't give. Don't ask what this asshole in New York, New Jersey, whatever. Well, don't ask what they didn't give. Ask yourself what the hell you gave, right? That's why I'm always the first to volunteer. I'm always the first to donate. I encourage people to do that too. Like, you cannot judge until you do your share. So, that is where we're going to circle back, and we're going to get back to disability now, because sometimes doing our share is not enough. There are so many incredible and hard-hitting thinkers and writers who have been paving this path for decades, and many who are doing so now. I want to acknowledge that most of them are women of color and are survivors of trauma, and I want you all to read their work. Okay, so what is the path they're paving? They're paving the path of this. They're paving the path of 6 women friends. And I will sit around on big pillows and dip our feet in Epsom salt tubs, sharing stories about how much our male doctors invalidate us. So please know that my intention was not to deliver a lecture or an expert imparting social information upon you. I wanted this to be more of a formal right here. Yes. Wonderful for her. It's not an option for me today, as we can see. And I've already spoken on that. I've been very candid about it. So we're going to keep going. So, I'd like to also make a request for those of you joining us on live stream. If you have something you want to share or a question or thought, please reach out to me via email. Same. My email is, well, I'll just say it. My email is alexandrianova@gmail.com. That's ALEXANDRIAANOVA. There's a blogger I was just reading about, I think it's Rad Pride. But she was very interesting because I kind of related to her insofar as, or I don't actually know the gender, I shouldn't say her, related to them because they were just basically doing what I do, which is like kind of speaking to the winds and wanting to collaborate, but there was nobody out there. But they were making a great point that the narcissistic family can extend out into society. And this is something you're going to see here down below. So in late 2014, I was sick with a chronic condition that recurs about 18 months and renders me for about 5 months each time unable to walk, drive, do my job, sometimes speak, and leave the bed. This particular flare coincided with the Black Lives Matter protests, which I would have attended unremittingly had I been able to. I live 1 block away from the MacArthur Park in a neighborhood that has been historically inhabited by Latino immigrants and is colloquially understood to be the place for illegal immigrants to begin their American lives. So the parks, then, is not surprisingly one of the most active places of protest in the city. So, having vulnerability is not stopping, these people in MacArthur Park. And I have been there. We're going to continue. Let's see. So, and the threat of violence and police brutality, but also because of illness or disability, or because they were caring for someone else with an illness or disability. I read With the Kind of God, and so I was trained to think that her definition of the political was radically liberating. Of course, I can see that it was in its own way, in its time. Right, so she talks about, in one fell swoop, she tried to get rid of the need for infrastructures of law, the democratic process of voting, the reliance on the individuals who've accumulated power to affect policy. All these have been required for an action to be considered political and visible as such. No, Arendt said, just get your body in the street and bam, political. Yes, that's entirely true. So if you're just walking around, when are you walking? Who are you walking with? Are you by yourself? Are you with somebody? If you're walking by yourself and you're me, and it's past 10 a.m. or 10 p.m., bam, you are, for many people that will see you, an implicit criminal. And it's not just the police. You can be an implicit criminal insofar as you're not supposed to do that by yourself, right? You're not supposed to drive by yourself either. You drive by yourself, there's an implicit crime. You walk by yourself, it's an implicit crime. You're just supposed to be with someone else. Namely, you're supposed to be with the observer, right? And so your aloneness as a woman is political. So this thing, get your body in the street. Ableist, bam, ableist. Don't be a woman at night, ableist, because I can't be a woman in the day. And that's part of the witch's dark side, is because at night you were less likely to be harassed, you were less likely to be seen, you were less likely to be incorrectly read politically. So even that is read politically again. So yeah, that's a rent. And then of course, this is the hard part. And again, pain, accountability is pain. So there are two failures here, though. The first is her reliance on a public, which requires a private, a binary between visible and invisible space. This meant that whatever takes place in private is not political. You can beat your wife in private and it doesn't matter. For instance, you can send private emails containing racial slurs, but since they weren't meant for the public, you are somehow not racist. Yeah, so if a tree falls in a forest, does not exist. Um, you know, Byung Chul Han, he's one of the top philosophers that I'm a pretty big fan of. One of the other Korean philosophers, and I believe we have a Korean philosopher in our mix-up today, but Byung Chul Han says transparency is narcissistic insofar as it encourages the mask because you're on display at all times. But this can and can be for a good thing. So if you're beating your wife, that is not something you want to happen. And if you're being racist and by yourself, I mean, it's not beating your wife, but it's getting there, right? It's getting there. It's normalizing certain behaviors, and yeah, like what starts to be, essentially somebody saying "fuck off," right? We all have our moments where we're in private and we just say "fuck off," and these things can become really dangerous to other people. It's not really about us being left alone. It's about us being, it's about us actually doing more to other people to harm them than it is actually about protecting our privacy, right? So, yeah, like there is that pyramid of violence, and even in privacy, you have to ask yourself, where are you on that? Can I forgive myself? Can I not forgive myself? And that is between us and ourselves, and us and other people. If I'm by myself and I'm cussing by myself because I need to process some anger, is that the same problem as hitting your wife? No, it's not. It's not at all the same thing. But in fact, there's a lot of these issues going on. So we're going to continue. Um, there's another problem too. Yeah. So everything can be read in this violent way. Everything can be intended to make you feel fear. And Byung Chul Han will talk about that transparency is not really about, um, increasing the intelligence of society, giving people the resources they need. What happens usually is a undeveloped private sphere clenches onto a very undeveloped public sphere, and what happens is they extort what capital they can, and they silence who they can as well. So um, I think the number one thing is, there is a difference between violation of your space and violation of another space, and making them equivalent is not okay. And self-defense, where it is possible, should be done. That is the anarchist perception, that self-defense is not just an excuse, it is a mandate. It is, you should self-defend. The problem is, when is it self-defense? When are you offending someone else, right? So we're going to continue. The failure of Arendt's political was immediately exposed in the feminism of the 1960s and 70s and the civil rights movement. The personal as political can also be read as saying the private is political. Because, of course, everything you do in private is political. Who you have sex with, how long your showers are, if you have access to clean water for a shower at all. Yeah, I read recently about, these delusions that people have about women who are asexual, and they will have partners that believe that they're lying and they're, secretly having sex with all these guys. And there's like literally no evidence, but it's just by merit of not being with them, they're inherently a criminal, right? So it's one of those things that if you are a woman in this world and you are not under surveillance, mainly surveillance meant to sexualize you, to turn you into the breadbasket of your local Europe, whatever that means. It could be as short as to your door. If you're not doing that, then you're inherently a criminal. It's nothing to do with you actually being a criminal. It's about your body being read politically for what it can do and what it means that it's not doing what it can do for itself, right? So, another one is like undeveloped land, like the crime of undeveloped land, the crime of natural resourcing your land as opposed to developing it. It's not a crime. It's that maybe I just wanted, there's this guy in Appalachia that I was watching a video about. Maybe I would rather just grow herbs in a forestry sense. I don't even need to tend to agriculture. Maybe I'd rather just grow herbs as they grow in the forest than I would want to manipulate the earth. I mean, I could. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with agriculture, but the point being made is that this idea of the crime of undeveloped land, that he didn't use his land for agriculture and he grew herbs as they grow in the forest, so that he could keep his trees, was seen as like he hadn't maximized the potential of his land. And the sick woman is sometimes the undeveloped land. Like she refuses to be developed by somebody who could develop her. She's walking alone at 10 p.m. She is driving alone at 10 a.m. She is not with me. That's her crime. It's not a crime. It's not a crime to be undeveloped land. It's not a crime to be a woman, and a woman is not land. The essential issue there is, of course, protectionism. We're just cooking up philosophy, and guilt is going to come up. I felt some guilt going through this, and I felt some pain, and I'm just being vulnerable. And other people are going to feel guilt. They're going to feel pain. Some people aren't going to be able to admit it. Instead of being able to say what I've been able to say, and maybe I am privileged to be able to say that, is instead of being able to say I feel guilt, I feel shame, they say you did this, you did that, and maybe that's their disability, and they can't even just be that vulnerable, right? So, it's an unattractive disability, and we have to face that certain disabilities are read more realistically than others. And that's a debate we've been having about narcissism, for instance, is because, we all can recognize narcissism causes pain. It's probably one of the most painful disorders, and not necessarily the most pain for the person who has it, a lot more for the people who are the victims of these people, right? But, there is substantial pain to, I'm sure, the people that have it. It's not as much, right? So, somebody who says, you did this and you did that, because they have these same feelings that I am able to say, I feel pain and I feel shame and I feel accounted for. They can't say that. And there is an ableism in that. Well, that is an ugly disability insofar as we say their inability to say that is just horrifying, that they would put their pain on me instead of just take responsibility for it. The question is that a choice or is that a disability? If they frankly cannot just accept that, they cannot just say, as I can say, I feel pain, I feel shame, that it just costs too much to them, is that a disability? And certain things are more costly to take care of as disabilities. If I am in charge of the disability of somebody well into dementia, I don't know if you ever experienced someone well into dementia, but they will say nasty things. They'll be nasty. They'll just be nasty, mean people. And, dementia is seen as a disability, but narcissism is not, right? So sometimes they do act the same. They will be incredibly selfish, mean, sadistic. They'll say the same things, but in dementia's case, we're like, yeah, this disability, In narcissism's case, we're like, ooh, no, that's just like kind of something wrong with them, you know? So um, there's an aesthetics of disability, and that can't be denied. Some disabilities are more beautiful and acceptable than others, like depression, like, right? Anybody can be depressed for the most part, and most people will not say much about it. I think the worst that someone's going to say about depression is like, oh, you're a fraud, you're a fake. That's one of the things I've seen is like you just laugh and somehow you're a fraud if you have depression, right? But yeah, that's just ignorance. You can laugh and still depression. But when it's something that is fundamentally causing more pain to other people than to the sufferer, then it gets into these aesthetics of disability. And the aesthetics can really skew moral at a certain point. Um, I don't know, is that right or wrong? But we keep going. So we keep going. So they say, shout out to all the disabled people, the sick people, the people with PTSD, anxiety. We can't protest in the streets with us tonight. Your voices are heard and valued and with us. Okay, so something at your local anarchist co-op says, get out in the street. You say, get out into your local disability community and stop saying that, because that is not the only way. Um, it's not to say that that's wrong. We should get out in the street if and when we can. But if you shame somebody who can't do that and you don't look at why they're not doing that out of the same natural attraction you feel to do that, um, that's ableism. And ableism is not going to solve the problem. It's going to be the next people in the street, you know, in their wheelchairs. They're going to be out in the street against you in a second. So we keep going. And then, of course, we do talk about Black Lives Matter. Um, so, yeah, so the importance of bodies is violently uncared for, right? So it ensures that a certain amount of people won't because they cannot show up. Couple this with physical and mental illnesses and disabilities that keep people in bed and at home, and we must contend with the fact that many with these protests are not able to participate in them. So, you know, as somebody who is, 5'10", healthy BMI, considered attractive in my body by many people, one thing, I am not allowed to have chronic fatigue. And again, that's that political reading of your body. If I have chronic fatigue with the body I do, I'm a fraud. I'm lying. I'm not telling the truth. Just from the way it looks. It's like, you don't inhabit my body. You don't know what it feels like. You look out the window and you see fog. You see fog outside in the forest. And people will say, oh, this forest is faking its fog. There's this forest in Montana, looks just like this forest. It doesn't have any fog. This forest is faking its fog. When you put it that way, it's like, no, you just don't understand the forest you're dealing with. It's not faking its fog. This is specific to its spatial temporal location. And even though it looks like that forest in Montana, it has fog because of where it is located. And it's not false, it's not fraud. Every day, almost every day, this forest wakes up to fog. You either love it or you leave it. It's just not something you can do. It's not something you can choose. So if they say this forest needs to not have any more fog, you need to wake up and that forest needs to be ready to go, ready to be seen, no fog. That's ableism, right? That is like saying, I do not give a shit about the specifics of this forest. I just want it to do what I want it to do. No, that's ableism, right? So we keep going, and behind that kind of, I just want it to do what I want it to do, is violently uncared for. Uninterested in something is violently uncared for, and that's pain. To be uncared for violently. That's a very interesting thing, and it ties right on back to what we were saying about, we're talking about Ukraine as part of the fallen apart USSR, and then we don't talk about Kosovo. And then the guy who writes the thesis doesn't answer my email, or, you know, the person talking about Serbia doesn't think to mention Nikola Tesla died of starvation, and all these different things. And it's just like all these little pieces of violently uncared for, right? And we don't think about it that way. We're just like, well, if I didn't speak to them or I didn't help them, it's not doing anything. No, there is violence in omission. There is violence in disinclusion. There's violence in isolation. And those things cause disability. The very disabilities that frustrate the very people who want the most out of these things. All right, so we keep going. How do you throw a brick through a window of a bank if you can't get out of bed? I mean, okay, this is the hard part. It's not strong enough, Now this is what I really want to talk about here. This is, I'm a spoonie, which means I have chronic illness. For those who don't know what chronic illness means, let me help. The word chronic comes from the Latin chronos, which means of time. So think of chronology, and it specifically means a lifetime. So a chronic illness is an illness that lasts a lifetime. In other words, it does not get better. There is no cure. And think about the rate of time. Yes, that means that you feel it every day. The term spoonie comes from a text online called The Spoon Theory by Christine Miserandino. She came up with it as a way to explain what chronic illness feels like to people who don't have it. She proposed an analogy of the spoon as a way to mark a unit of energy. Each task you do every day costs you a spoon. To get out of bed, to cook for yourself, to get dressed, to answer an email, all of these cost a spoon. For those without chronic illness, you feel as though you have a near infinite supply. You can spend spoon after spoon without consequence. For spoonies, we have to ration our spoons. We have a limited supply. We often run out of them before lunch. So what we're talking about here is the fact that not all time passes in the same way for all people. Now, that's an interesting statement because analytically we say, of course it all passes at the same time. Your 8 o'clock is just as good as my 8 o'clock because we meet at 8 o'clock and it's 8 o'clock. But my 8 o'clock, my 10 o'clock could be a lot harder for me because of my ADHD. I need to draw. I need to have a transcript. I need to have text at some point. Like I do better on Coursera, for instance. I can read the text as we go. I need to be able to draw. That 8 to 10 is not the same 8 to 10 for you if I don't have those. It is much harder for me. And if you don't feel it, it's not because it's not happening. And that's the pain of subjectivity, is because there's a real distance between my subjectivity and your subjectivity. And the more there is disability, the more there is difference, the more there are points of mutual communicability that need to happen and aren't happening, right? So disability is another way that creates these social pain of you're different than me. I don't have the same pain when I'm doing this. I don't need to draw. I don't need the transcript. I'm able to hear and retain. I don't need these visuals like you do. And it's interesting because, unless somebody is trained on disability, they can read it as incompetence, right? So they'll be like, there's a difference between disability and competence because empowered disability has some and almost all the same abilities as somebody without it. Like we have these independent disability features in Berkeley where disability movement really got started, like where ADA was really getting its strength from. These independent living facilities, and I actually worked with one of the originals who was a beneficiary of that way back in the day. She was Native American. She was a writer. She had a pretty bad disability. I was her caretaker for a while, and she lived in those original independent living collectives. And one of the things there is when you speak to somebody that different from you, there's this pain. There's a real pain, and to admit there's not that pain is you're in denial. You're trying to make it prettier than it is. You don't need to, but don't make it more painful, if that makes sense. You don't need to make it prettier, but don't make it more painful. And that means learn about the disability, but don't deny the disability. Don't say somebody can do something they can't do, but also don't say that they can never do it, right? So, for instance, if somebody doesn't have disability training, they may look at someone like myself and be like, oh, they just can't learn from lectures. Wrong. If you record that lecture, I can learn just fine. I just have to go back and listen. Better yet, if you give me a transcript, I learn faster than you. If you give me a transcript and you give me something to draw with, I learn 10 times faster than you, and I retain it. So is it a disability? No, it's neurodiversity. So like there's these readings socially of diversities that can be seen um, as disabilities, and that's a whole different thing, because is autism a neurodiversity or is it a disability? It depends on who you're speaking to. It depends on what you're doing. So we'll keep going. This is what I really want to talk about. This quote right here. So, what if depression in the Americas at least could be traced to histories of colonialism, genocide, slavery, legal exclusion, and everyday segregation and isolation that haunt all of our lives, rather than to be biochemical imbalances? Yes. Why? Because if we have these features of protectionism, colonialism, protectionism. I have my colony because I want resources. I want them on the cheap. I want to give them their fair value. I want a lot of resources to extract as much profit from it and send it back to the home country. Colonialism, genocide. I want to get rid of this set of genes because there are problems to my goals, essentially. Hitler will say that he didn't like the Jews because of their conscience, right? Well, they probably gave him a lot of pushback, and he didn't like the pushback because of their conscience. Slavery, same thing as colonialism. I just want to extract as much profit without giving people the value they generated as much as possible, destroy their right to love, destroy their humanity, destroy their connections to each other so I can extract as much profit and I can be rich. Like I said, there's two ways to be rich in this life, and the one is to really exploit people, and the other is to actually have something very valuable that people will buy. Fortunately, most people go with the former. Little to nobody goes with the latter anymore. We continue. Legal exclusion, slavery, they're the same thing. I don't give slaves the same right to the law that I give non-slaves, and it keeps them in slavery. Everyday segregation and isolation. Everyday segregation, I don't give people knowledge of what they could have. I keep them isolated so they don't have the knowledge they could have. And then all of those other things are just domino pieces. From there, we get legal exclusion, slavery, genocide, colonialism, right? So what if depression was just, I look at these things and I say, there's no way I cannot be depressed. Yes, if I am the subject of slavery, if I am not being given the same legal rights as me, but in a male form, simply because I do not have something between my legs that can impregnate a bunch of women. And that's seen as somehow more significant in a world where that doesn't even, most people don't even do that unless they're psychopaths. And even if they are psychopaths, people will shame them for not taking care of their kids. Even in a world where we can see that that is happening, this legal exclusions, all these parts of it. What if depression was a normal, natural response to that? And what does that mean about the pain and time? It means that those that go through these experiences have longer subjective times, more painful times because of their extractability. They have more time and more pain, and because of the more pain, it feels like more time, and it's a feedback loop that itself is depression, right? So it says, I'd like to change the word depression there to mean all chronic illnesses. And if sick woman theory takes this premise to be true. So now they're going to go through a more interesting piece. So we're going to keep going. She wants to say, I am not interested in making a contest for this. Don't point your finger at me. If we are in the same boat, don't do it. Just don't do it. We have past trauma. By pointing a finger, we create more trauma for ourselves. We need to be there for each other, creating bonds, etc. So let me say you do not need approval from me or doctor or anyone else to know if you have pain, trauma, or chronic illness. You know your body better than anyone else. You know to carry the weight of the rock. So what they're saying is, if you are in pain, you are in pain. I don't think you would say you are in pain if there wasn't something in pain, right? It might not be a pain that registers on an MRI. It might be a different kind of pain. But mainly when people say they are in pain, there is actually pain going on. I have yet to meet someone. I mean, I don't even think it's possible. I don't think it's possible for somebody. Even the pain of being entitled and not getting what you want. Yeah, it's probably valid pain, but does that mean I have to answer to it? That's a different question. But the thing is, if you feel pain, you probably feel pain. And the first part is admitting you feel pain and just being vulnerable. If you're a male and you are reading this and you're like, dang, I'm feeling pain, I'm feeling shame. Yeah, that's pain. Yeah, it's pain of entitlement. But it's pain. And then we keep going. So, a dear friend and mentor once told me that the more specifically personal you can make something, the more universal resonance it will have. Another mentor suggested that for tonight's talk, I should go as deep into the vulnerability of my eye as I can. No small talk. Yeah, I'm not doing small talk right now, right? I'm being very real. So with them as my guides, I'll just plunge in and speak frankly about my situation so you know where I'm coming from. I'm antagonistic to the notion that the Western medical insurance industrial complex understands me in my entirety, though they seem to think they do. They have attached many words to me over the years, and though some of them have been provided articulation that has been useful, first I'd like to suggest some other ways of understanding my appearance. Okay? I like that. I really like that. First, I'd like to suggest some other ways of understanding my appearance. May you read my body politically. 10 a.m. walking by myself, 10 a.m. driving by myself. One was a remedy for the other, and yet it's still not good enough. It's still not whoever was observing me. I was supposed to be under their control, right? So, under those different issues, then we see that some other ways of understanding my experience. Let's read them. Let's read the other ways that you can understand this experience in a way that I am not violently uncared for and you are not violently uncared for. So we talk about, she talks about her astrology and, this part. Let's talk about this. So my mother suffers from mental illness that was actively denied by her family. And that was then exacerbated by a 40-year-long drug addiction, and to this day remains undiagnosed as she makes her way in and out of jail, squats, and homelessness. Let's talk about that because she has an underlying disorder that explains the jails, the squats, and the homelessness. And it's not her that is the problem. It's the active denial of it. I hate to say it, gross incompetence is real, and it's a horrible situation because it's a circle of denial of disability insofar as they're denying their disability to recognize that there is a real disability, and their inability to recognize it is a disability. So it's a vicious cycle, right? Continuing, or that I was physically and emotionally terrorized as a child, raised in an environment of poverty, addiction, abuse, and violence, and have been estranged from my parents for 13 years. Perhaps it can all be encapsulated in the word trauma, or perhaps I am simply more permeable than is acceptable. more sensitive than is considered functional. Perhaps I just got a thin skin and have some bad luck. I think this part is great. So I really emphasize this. I really recommend the book Breeding Sweetgrass. Again, this is our definition of respect for the cauldron. Breeding Sweetgrass also talks about the actual ability of the native paradigm to humanize nature a lot more than a white culture is going to do. White culture does say things like use your resources. If your resources are ecologies, you need to ask, should I be using them? And am I in denial of my part in this ecology by saying it is my resource and not an ecology of which I am a part, right? So, they talk about this placedness, and that's something that Native Americans will say that, even white anarchists struggle with, is accepting that we are in an ecology just like everything else, and that there's no bridge, there's no schism between civilization and nature in this way that, um, I'm blanking on his name, but this big guy in Seattle he'll say like, there's primitivism and then there's civilization. It's like, no, this is all part of nature. You look at ants, you look at insects, you look at different kind of species, they build things that look kind of like us when you take a step back, and then you realize then we've never left nature. There is nothing that is anarchist at the end of the day. So, I really would like to point to this quote in particular where it says Native American Cree language, the possessive noun and verb of a sentence are structured differently than in English. So in Cree, one does not say, I am sick. Instead, one says, the sickness has come to me. I love that. So here is what has come to me. So he talks about what has come to me. They talk about endometriosis. So epic, monstrous bleeding. It means that I've had a miscarriage, can't have children. When I explained the disease to a friend of mine, who didn't know about it, she exclaimed, so your whole body is a uterus. That's one way of looking at it, yes. And you can imagine the ancient Greek male physicians would have to say about that. It means that every month, those rogue uterine cells that have implanted themselves throughout my body obey their nature and bleed. So to quote fellow Indo warrior Hillary Mantel, this causes cysts, which eventually burst, leaving behind bundles of dead tissue, like the debris of little bombs. Yeah, okay. So endometriosis is when your uterine lining is growing where it's not supposed to be, and it causes extreme pain. Not fun. Not fun. They also talk about their bipolar, their panic disorder, depersonalization. And then, of course, all these intersections between what it means to be someone with endometriosis and bipolar and panic disorder and depersonalization, and how they feed on each other. And like any good doctor is going to be like, you are a system. These are not isolated pieces and parts. These are all part of it. You are an ecology. Each part is informing some other part of you and can explain the grander symptoms that you deal with. And then they talk about another medication I was prescribed costs $800 a month. I only took it because my doctor slipped me free samples. Wow. So yeah. Talk about immune system disease, burning ache in the bones. Yeah. So this one I also have. I don't have shingles, but I also have the dull burning ache in the bones. If I don't take medication, I get shingles once a month, which take me out for about 3 weeks at a time. My acupuncturist described it as a little demon steaming black smoke and frothing about nestling in my bones. So that disease has found them, right? Going back to what they were saying, the sickness has come to me. Not who you are, something that really, intersects with the idea that these depressions we go through, these pains we go through are not necessarily ours. Sometimes they're given to us, and not anything about our bodies. Like endometriosis, I'm sure there are, more epigenetic features that maybe you can ascribe to trauma, but it's very indirect and it's not something we're going to say it's our ecology. But PTSD is your ecology. You were traumatized by something outside of you and it changed your body. That's not your body doing that. That's your ecology doing that to you, affecting your body. And that's traumatic in itself, because now you are a victim for life of just being located somewhere in space and time. So you keep going. Sick woman theory is about a political protest that is internalized, lived, embodied, and no doubt suffering. So you see those pink hats, the pussy hats or whatever, and it's like misogynist. They have pictures. I think one of them is of Bill Gates, like making this like horrified, disgusted face, like that's so disgusting, and it's just like literally what he was birthed from, right? And sick woman theory is the actual reading of that, because they'll say, oh, these sick women with their pussy hats, it's just so disgusting, just literal misogyny, the hatred of the jinn. Jinn is the etymology that is behind vagina, is to do with the female's anatomy. So if you have a hatred for it, you're literally a misogynist. It's just like no getting around that. But this is the actual meaning. This is the compassionate medical meaning of sick woman theory, and it's not the hateful misogynist. Oh, that's a sick woman for what? For not denying something. I feel pain. I feel shame. Oh, that's a sick woman. There's something wrong with not denying something. Oh, I have a vagina. Nothing wrong with not denying that, right? Apparently that makes you a sick woman. It doesn't at all. So sick woman theory is a mode of political protest that is internalized, lived, embodied, and no doubt suffering. It is an existence that endures in the face of certain and inevitable obliteration, while also redefines existence itself as something that is primarily and always vulnerable. And since a body is defined by its vulnerability, not temporarily affected by it, and so we need to reshape the world around this fact. Sick woman theory insists that the body and mind are sensitive and reactive to regimes of oppression, particularly our current regime of neoliberal, white supremacist, imperial capitalist, cis hetero patriarchy. It is part of our bodies and minds carry the historical trauma of this. That is the world itself that is making and keeping us sick. Do not engage in violent uncaring for this. If you feel inherently, repulsed, that sounds like feminism. No, do not engage in violent uncaring for this. This means those parts of us that we all have that have not been served by this very lazy, uniform, Ford factory way of looking at the world are in pain. And a broader perspective relieves them of that pain. So take the time for the broader perspective, right? So to take the term woman as the subject of this work is a strategic, all-encompassing embrace. Though the identity of woman has erased and excluded many, especially women in color and trans people, I choose to use it because it still represents the uncared for, the secondary, the oppressed, the non, the less than, the not yet, the particular rather than the universal. The problematics of this term will always require critique, and I hope that sick woman theory can help us undo those in its own way. So you're saying, I'm going to use woman for everything. And you might be like, what? Why are we using woman for everything? Because we're talking about the witch. We're talking about sick woman. She's out there out in witching hour. Why is she out in the witching hour? Because she's evading harassment. Why is she evading harassment? Because she's a gifted woman. Why is she a gifted woman? Because she was born that way. Why was she born that way? Because it's natural. Why is it natural? Because nature created her, just like you, and yet she is the sick woman. Nature created her just like you were created, and yet she is a sick woman. Is that her or is that nature? So that is sick woman theory, and that is what it means to be the uncared for, the secondary depressed, the non, the un, the less than, the not yet, the not ever, the maybe later, the not now. This is sick woman theory. This is the witch. We say now, I don't care if you're coming. I will go by myself. I will go at the witching hour. So we continue. That the word itself can be an empowerment is the spirit in which sick woman theory is named. So the sick woman is an identity and body that can belong to anyone, denied the privileged existence or the cruelly optimistic promise of such an existence of the white, straight, healthy, neurotypical, upper middle class, cis-enabled body man. Again, do not engage in violent uncare for that, because if it hurts, lean into the pain. We all have parts of that hurt. We all have parts of that hurt. I'm white, right? I'm middle class. We all have parts of it that hurt. We lean in because we will not violently uncare for that statement, because in that statement is healing, is medicine. What is the medicine? There are parts of us in that have not been served. There are parts of us that are not neurotypical. There are parts of us that are not able-bodied. There are parts of us that are not straight, that are not healthy, that are not white. There are parts of us that are not being served by just denying this, right? And to just go with the Ford factory understanding of it doesn't solve anything. So we continue. The sick woman is anyone who does not have this guarantee of care. The sick woman is told that to the society, her care, even her survival, does not matter. Like Black Lives Matter, yes, yeah, very similar. Sick woman does not matter. The sick women are all of the dysfunctional, dangerous, and endangered, badly behaved, crazy, incurable, traumatized, disordered, diseased, chronic, wretched, undesirable, and altogether dysfunctional bodies belonging to women, people of color, poor, ill, neurotypical, differently abled, queer, trans, and gender fluid people who have been historically pathologized, hospitalized, institutionalized, brutalized, rendered unmanageable, and therefore made culturally illegitimate and politically invisible. It sounds like. So then they list who can be the sick woman. I am going to go through these. Hopefully, I'm going to be done by 8:30. Let me plug in my charger in 1 second. All right. So here we go. Here is who can be the sick woman. She was suffering an episode, and he was murdered in police custody, and his story was denied by everyone operating under white supremacy. Her name is Tanisha Anderson. The sick woman is a 50-year-old gay man who was raped as a teenager and has remained silent in shame, believing that men can't be raped. The sick woman is a disabled person who couldn't go to the lecture on disability rights because he was held in a venue without accessibility. The sick woman is a white woman with a chronic illness rooted in sexual trauma who must take painkillers in order to get out of bed. The sick woman is a straight man with depression who's been medicated since early adolescence and now struggles to work the 60 hours a week his job demands. The sick woman is someone diagnosed with a chronic illness whose family and friends continually tell them that they should exercise more. The sick woman is a queer woman of color whose activism, intellect, rage, and depression are seen by white society as unlikable attributes of her personality. The sick woman is a black man killed in police custody and officially said to have severed his own spine. His name was Freddie Gray. Sick woman is a veteran suffering from PTSD on the months-long waiting list to see a doctor at the VA. The sick woman is a single mother, illegally immigrated and shuffling between 3 jobs in order to feed her family and finding it harder and harder to breathe. We have all pieces of each one of these, each of us. So the binary is to be abolished as sick and well. We say be well, but what if we can't be well, right? So I'm going to keep kind of brush the rest. I really wanted to get through that to let you know what and who can be a sick woman. I really like that part. They're talking about practice and healing, and they're saying if I could heal myself, if only I decided to, right? So, and of course, if I had some magical, expensive therapy, something would happen and I would just be healed. And saying, what if that's not true? What if we have chronic illnesses that last our whole lives and there's no healing? And what if those are not all on us? What if those are ecological illnesses in society? And what if we had no choice but to become and heal those? That all of us, by being part of this, unfortunately, equally bear a burden we did not ask for, and internalizing these wounds and healing them with our bodies, and making our bodies heal. So we keep going. I want to make the case now for the callus as an analogy for trauma, not the scar. And here I not do Chandler McWilliams for suggesting this to me. A callus is something that builds up to protect the part of the body being used, and it continues to be used. It's not over, it doesn't end. What's great about the callus is that it makes the task easier. For anyone who plays an instrument or uses a tool or is a dancer, you know that once you build up your calluses, the job will go smoother. And among your colleagues, your calluses are recognized as signs of all your hard work, and you can admire and appreciate each other's calluses. Also, sometimes calluses can rip off. And then you got to start from scratch, building them back up. There's such poetics in that image to me about how healing works, that it's cyclical, continuous, and it's part of everyday use. I want to propose the callus when thinking about sickness and trauma because it means that instead of rejecting these experiences, moving on and getting over them, silencing them, and thinking of them as something that will and ought to end, instead we envelop them into our daily lived, accumulating, and embodying experiences because they will be that way. Epigenetics says they will in fact become us, and we become our ecologies. Every one of the body in any ecology does some of the processing of that ecology. Okay? So let's keep going. I was sent to this therapist who saved my life. Her name was Linda Hoak. If you ever have the opportunity to talk to her, please do. She was a practicing Zen Buddhist and poet, and she told me simply, in another culture, another time, you'd just be considered a mystic. So we got our literal list for that. She didn't give me books like Dealing with Mental Illness or Dummies like I have been given before. It's true. The woman that gave me that was a Freudian. Instead, Linda gave me the writings of Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, Hildegard of Bingen, who I love. She's German. And Julian of Norwich, Marjorie Kemp, and Accounts of Enlightenment by Buddhist monks and nuns. Okay, so what does it mean to be a mystic? Those women, and we're talking about mystic women in particular right here. So it's a feminist protest against patriarchy, but it's so much more than that. Each of these women is something radical. They not only obeyed their own bodies and minds, which they have been taught were evil, but they insisted upon them, right? The mandate of self-defense. It's not merely an excuse. It's not merely something you can use if convenient. You are mandated to self-defend yourself because you are an entity that has been conspired into existence by nature, and it did not do that on accident. You are mandated to protect this thing that it has conspired to exist. We keep going. This part I also like. It's called The Mirror of Simple and Annihilated Souls. remain only wanting and in desire of love. Isn't that beautiful? I'll say it again. The mirror of simple and annihilated souls who remain only in wanting and desire of love. So she was burned at the stake in 1310 for heresy. So this is right alongside with what it means to be a sick woman, right? As the witch trials. This is what happened. And refused to destroy what the church ordered her to. She refused to destroy herself. This is real. It's still happening to this day. There's another favorite example of mine is Christina the Astonishing, a Belgian mystic of the 11th century, who is reported to have fled into the forest because she was so disgusted by the people around her. She survived for 3 months by drinking her own breast milk. Oh, what a sick woman, right? What does it mean to drink your own breast milk? I mean, this is probably a little bit mythological. You can't really do that without some other nutrients, but the idea is essentially like she lived on empathy for herself. She lived on self-love. She lived on empathy for herself. She was a Christian. Christina the Astonishing. That's a Belgian mystic. Yeah. She was a witch who was Christian. How can you do that? You just gotta run away. So we keep going. But essentially, I just want to talk about here is that the sick woman, the disability theory starts with the witch, right? It starts right there. So what binds such a community together is solidarity against the patriarchal institutions of church, empire, law, corrective morals, which is why it is anarchistic. And crucially, the community is bounded together by love for God, of whatever you call the force that is bigger than you. That is the biggest part. You can call it ecology. You can call it pantheism. You can call it humanity. You can call it love. Whatever you call it, as long as you admit there are things bigger than you that will always be greater and more all-encompassing and complex and profound than you. Hold something holy. That's what they're saying. So love is both the self and the other, and the politics of love. It's really good. We keep going. Yeah, so this is a really big part. This is a really big part. So let me end by saying that I would not be alive in here tonight if not for a group of people, many of whom are in this room, who have made caring for me one of their priorities. When I am sick in bed, the wheelchair, and even up this very afternoon, they come over, cook me meals, drive me to the doctor, email, and text daily to say, you can do it. Let me tell you right now, in a sense, that's an ableism. I know you probably hate me. Not all of us have this. I do not have that. I do not have this. I'm a very disabled person. I have multiple disabilities. I do not have that. Your community can be an ability, just like your ecology can be a disability, right? So to have a strong community is an ability, it is a privilege. And unfortunately, a lot of white family sickness has it that, yeah, they don't have those privileges, right? Again, I say, read these native pieces that they write to the white anarchist community. They say, you're not placed, you're not holding each other in community, you're not keeping a relationship. You're saying this is civilization, this is nature. No, there's social ecological facts about the world. There is no difference between the two. Civilization is part of nature. You can deny it. You can be like, oh, maybe in the reservation, that's where civilization and nature intersect, and not really on the other white parts. But there's no real reservation. There's no real thing that isn't anarchist, right? So I had this idea that to write a love poem and give it to the one you desired was the most radical resistance. So let me actually go back. I missed some stuff. So we say, they come over, cook me meals, drive me to the doctor, email and text daily to say, you can do it. And show me a kind of care that none of the institutions of supposed wellness in the society have come close to you. I used to think that the most anti-capitalist gesture left had to do with love and desire, particularly love poetry. I had this idea that to write a love poem and give it to the one you desired was the most radical resistance. But now I see I was wrong. The most anti-capitalist protest is to care for another, to take on historically feminized and therefore invisible practice of nursing, nurturing, caring, to take seriously each other's vulnerability and fragility and precarity, and to support it, honor the precarity, honor the vulnerable, empower it to protect each other, a radical kinship. Yeah, totally. So really the main thing there is end these violent uncarings, end these rejections that just leave so many things disturbed in ourselves and in society. And hey, we all have hypocrisies there. I have hypocrisies and you do too. If you deny them, go ahead, but it's denying the fundamental anarchism that we cannot possibly care for all things, but we can do a great job with what we have to care for. So, because once we are all ill and confined to bed, which we will be, sharing our stories of therapies and comforts, forming support groups, listening to each other's tales of trauma, prioritizing the care and love of our ill, our pained, expensive, sensitive, fantastic bodies, and there is no one left to go to work. Perhaps then finally capitalism will screech to a halt. So I say let's give it a try. And to close, I'm going to take Armstrong Croce's slogan, the great line of Queen of our time. I woke up like this. I woke up like this. We flawless ladies tell them. Thank you. Okay, I didn't wake up like this. I'm not pretending I did. I have a face beyond makeup, and that's part of my vulnerability. I don't feel particularly safe with the public, and that's because of my history of trauma with it. As long as I acknowledge that, I am doing my due diligence to myself. So I did not wake up like this. I did not wake up like this, but I am still flawless. I have trauma, but I am still flawless, right? So now I'm going to do a bit of a switch. Yeah, I think we're gonna go to the next one here. I don't think we're gonna have time. I'm gonna try to do some of the topological analysis in the last 20 minutes. I hate that, but yeah, let's do that. I'm gonna stop there and then I'm gonna do that. Okay. Alrighty. Where? Okay, so now share. So a topological analysis of space-time consciousness, self-other. So now I'm kind of cooking this one pretty much by myself. The witching hour. Witching hour is when the witch cooks by herself. Usually because nobody else came, and that's because of the sexism inherent in capitalism. But anyway, I used to hold down a job where I cooked from, I think it was 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., something like that. Maybe it was a little bit later. I think it might have been 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. But yeah, I cooked that all night. I cooked all night. So I own the witching hour. We continue. The topological analysis of space-time consciousness, self-other, and self-other. Ha-Young Kim, I love this lady. She is a professor. So what is time? What do we understand by time? Is time different than my time consciousness? So what are we doing with time and now that we're moving from anarchism into time? So now we're talking about the differences between my consciousness of time and the objective nature of time. And there's mutuality between them. So I don't know. I'm gonna hope. Let me check one thing. I'm gonna stop this share really quickly. Okay, so yeah, so I can do this. Okay, so we are, yeah. Let's take a look. So this one is what I really wanted to bring in a little bit. I am not doing due diligence to this because I literally have 15 minutes. We can thank my ADHD for that. But I wanted to distinguish here between clock time, historical time, and biographical time. Okay, let's quickly go through those because we're going to use those. We're going to cook them right back into Hayam Kim. Historical time, the development of one's body over time, including family influences and genetic factors. Biographical time, lifetime experiences which make up a self and which may be disrupted by illness. So we were really talking about biographical time before, right? And historical time doesn't necessarily say that you're disabled because like they're just taking you as a measure. Biographical time is more of a social relation. So we got two kinds of time here. If I am read as disabled, even if I don't feel disabled, like take a narcissist, for example. I mean, I'm really taking an anarchist approach to narcissism in this meeting. And let's say that I'm a narcissist in this sense of somebody who doesn't actually think I have the disorder, but other people suffer, right? I will be baffled by the way other people treat me, and it will cause me pain only because of them. But by myself, historically time, I'm not going to be suffering, right? If I just take a look at how I developed and myself and just as an entity, right? When we look at historical analysis, usually it's just like taking a look at the country and we're just like, as it is, as it is. But then when I bring it back into social, that's when there's this potential for incongruencies that create pain, right? Like, how do I measure up to other historical time? So historical time is very much like the internal body outside of its ecology. We add the ecology, that becomes the biographical time. And the last one is the cold heart of clock time. Clock time is pure analyticity. Is such a thing possible? Or is it just really just the last intercepting point between all these histories and biographies? It remains to be told. You know, people who are very relativistic in nature, they will say, of course it is only. Of course, it is merely only that they are intersecting. There's no objective time. Other people will be like, well, it's the nature of numericity to have specific divisions that are incrementally imperfect unto themselves. We merely posit the same distance uniformly over an infinite time, and we have analyticity. The problem is whose uniformity, whose infinity, and whose increment. So, it's probably it's a mutual knot. So that's really what I wanted to talk about. This piece also here says clock time, perceived time, and internal time are more relevant to the everyday lives of people with chronic widespread pain. I have to say the anarchist piece did a little bit better job of explaining that than this more scientific piece, but it's, you know, we all have our neuroses, and science is pretty solid at what it does. Like I talk about in the Tingle of Science, science gets the job every time because it has a precise product, a reliable, replicable method. Anyway, we continue. And the introduction notion of controllable time is as an important aspect of the experience of living with chronic widespread pain. So the notion of controllable time. So I'm controlling time, right? A lot of the difference, the pain that difference causes is because I can't control uh, those differences. And we use clock time to refer to time related to tasks or routines to be carried out at particular points, often determined externally, for example, work or taking medicine. They're also going to talk about somebody going on a walk with cancer, and they'll say, when I go on a walk with cancer, I remember very viscerally the body memory of going on a walk without cancer. And I remember what it was like to not experience so much pain going on the walk. And I really have to take breaks on the walk. Compound that with depression that comes with cancer. Sometimes the depression that comes with cancer makes chopping vegetables hard. So you have to take extra time. You feel your body moving to nourish yourself about an existence you're ambivalent about because of the pain you're going through. And as you chop those vegetables, you feel very viscerally that ambiguity, that uncertainty that you actually do want to continue your existence with its pain. And each moment you're wrestling with that and uncertainty that you're not sure you want to continue with this kind of pain, but you keep cutting those vegetables. And that pushback from the pain of your body, from your body and its ambivalence to remaining a body and not splitting into the light it once was, it's painful. And reconciling each chop of that vegetable as going forward with giving yourself nutrients. And that is part of the pain of cancer. That isn't just pain, it's also ambivalence and continuing to be a body in pain. That isn't merely just the physical, visceral pain of taking a walk when you have cancer, right? And so there are these extensive moments of longer time for things that are the differences between the past and present. The extension, the length of now compared to the brevity of previous has a skewing, distorted, and almost torturous effect when you link them. When I think almost like, this trapezoid of pain. I think of how brief and easy and certain I was to be alive without cancer. And then I think now of how long the same task takes, not only because of the physical pain I feel, but also because my ambivalence about nourishing a body in this pain. And between those is slowly this extension that is unnatural to a linear timeline. To do this, the trapezoidal sides, it's painful because now I really feel how much longer this was to that in those moments, right? And once I'm here, but it's going back down to that memory of when it was shorter. That hurts, right? And those trapezoid of pain is what makes it longer, and those differences are about control. It's about, I can't control this pain. I can't control the future. If I had a delusion of cancer, I would send it into the world in a second, right? But we don't. And knowing that, we have to go forward every day, knowing that. And that creates this sense of lack of control. And the lack of control also creates that trapezoid of pain of difference when we had control, or at least we didn't have anything that even brought up the question of control. When our bodies were healthy, control was just a given. Nothing really stuck out to us in our sensory perception that caused pain. And so now that we have it, we want to control it, but we can't, and that's even more pain. So I just wanted to point that out. And so biographical time is probably where most of that pain is coming from, because it's not just your body, but now it's the social body, including family influences and genetic factors. Lifetime experiences which make up a self and which may be disrupted by illness. So Ellis is comparative. It is inherently comparative. So I really want to, I'm running out of time. I only have about 9 minutes left, but we are going to very quickly. All right, we're going to very quickly go right here. Just so this is a painted crossing. And if you look right here, from here to there, what do you see? That's what I'm talking about. Those differences are paint-filled across. So you can see my curve. This is not the one I wanted, but this is very interesting. I think this here is self-neutrality, or neutrality is self-neutrality. So time is time is time, but time in what way? There's body time, how your body is decomposing given its biological constitution as an energetic configuration. And then there's how that works communicating across the network of other bodies going through the same deterioration. And then there's those things that are nothing to do with life at all. Those inorganic pieces of configuration that, we can say it's objective mathematical or whatever, but who knows what they really are. Take one look at configuration theory, and it's like unearthing Cthulhu because it works just as well as organic stuff, but it also explains inorganic material. So those intersections, I mean, this is different, but it's similar enough. My now, your now, and their now. Their now is objective time. Your now is kind of like how I relate to you and what that means about my time, and then there's my time, right? And these are all in the cycle together. They are moving together at all times, and it's the knottedness that they really want to point out here. It's that they are intercommunicable. That's the creepy part for some people. I don't know about you, but the fact that my time is even communicable to your time, what the hell is doing that? Right? So configuration theory really kind of like the embeddedness of it. There's don't like once you really start to see this, you see that you have to be social ecological. You can't be there's civilization and then there's nature. And you have to actually have this deep embeddedness because there's no other possible explanation for why my body and its deteriorations and its biological configurations is so communicable to yours, despite the variety of spatial temporal differences that have accumulated in our different memory processing systems, right? That in itself kind of reveals that there is a deep embeddedness that is really, 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 really fundamental, and does not have anything to do with organic nature inherently. You might want to call that objective if you want to, but not necessarily. That's really scary because this relativity stuff, it works. I mean, relativity still could be objective when you think of it like this, but it's pretty interesting. So we keep going, and then we're going up. We got some German words for you. I'm gonna try my hand at them. So, Vorstellung. I don't know if you say the L's. I imagine myself being here, there, and then. What the heck are you talking about? Okay, I imagine myself here. I imagine myself in the past. And I got that trapezoid going on. Okay, then there's Beobachtung. I see myself here now. I'm not referencing putting myself in reference. So this is like your very historical time. And then there's Erinnerung. I remember myself being here, there, back then. That's your body memory. It's a ghost. It's a ghost. forgotten, and it's just really something that was stored efficiently by your memory system, and it was sufficiently stored that I can say, I remember something similar to this, but it's not really that. And whether or not differences between people are that, like this sense that you are there, but across time, and it could be you in some way. That's behind empathy. These kind of weird delusions like that. But I really want to get into that window. Where's that window? I really like the window that was going on. I really like this piece, so I might come back to it. I mean, actually, probably won't come back to it because I like it too much. The window one. Music. We all love music. Yeah, this is just such a good piece. I need to come back to it. The things across time. Okay, we got our knot. Where is that? I had to think across time to remember that this was here. Oh, that's not it. Actually, it might be it. Let's take a look. No, that's not it. Where did it go? I remember it in time. And there it is. Okay. Yes, that's the one I want. Okay, so this is a very metaphysical idea. And if you like metaphysics, this is the starting piece for you. I have to say, she did a great job. So, plurality of nows. Traditionally in philosophy, we understand the flow of time as the line of points of now, a seamless succession of the now moments. In chronic illness, the seamless succession of the now moments is interrupted, and it's noisily interrupted insofar as I can feel that there is a seamless succession clearly being interrupted because I am suddenly flung into the past, into a body memory where it wasn't interrupted. So there's an inherent association to it. So anyway, going back, so each now is believed to have its own plane. We have now. Now take a look at this now. This is what I mean by whose increment. There is a position you can take in a complex space-time configuration where these increments, you and I, we look at them, we say, those are not evenly spaced. There is a position in space and time that you can take where they are in fact evenly spaced. Right? So that is like the promise of the painless position, right? Some people might say that's death, some people might say that's birth, but the idea that there is a position where things are perfectly spaced and in perfect succession, it's like just the profound music that has no pain and all glory and all beauty and all pleasure. But that's not the case. And it's in those discrepancies where we realize we have a body, right? So that is, we have an idea because we can see these segmentations of time, our memory capturing this memory, capturing this memory, capturing that memory. There's a sense that there is an increment, there's a rhythm to it, but then we realize when we actually start capturing it and then we look back on it, take those German words, I already forgot that, but we look back and I think it was Urshalom or something like that. We look back and we see those were not as clearly spaced as we thought they were, right? And what does that mean for us? That means for us that if they are not as clearly spaced as we thought they were, not only does it mean I have a body, but it means that there could be a perfect form. And it's the idea of the perfect form that only exists between the discrepancies between moments. There is only perfection in the imperfections that we derive looking back on our past. So I'm going to leave this all here. And I just want you to think about that. Think about the fact that whose increment, whose time, whose infinity, and who's succession through them? Like, who's? It ain't happening by itself. So, um, it's a natural derivative of having a body, right? So, I think that is it for now. I want you to take a look at this, and I will probably bring this back into the next one, because I really love this piece, but I didn't spend enough time with it because the other one was so good. But I will see you the next time, and I appreciate anybody who watches this. Unfortunately, nobody came, but that's okay. I completely expected that. That was really hard reading. So, good night to you. I get a hug from your sister, as they say in Sick Woman Theory, and I'll see you in the next cauldron. Okay, bye.